this minute in yet another decision that has been taken by the Central Board of Film Certification, the CBFC, coming down heavily on yet another film, suggested to chop off two words from an upcoming film, the two words being dalit and sex toy. Pahlaj Nihalani led CBFC's instructed the makers of the film to replace the word sex toy with adult sight. A source close to this development here states that the word dalit has therefore been muted from this film Noor, wherever it occurs. And their explanation for this move here is that references to the community will invoke reference to the caste system that is prevalent in the country. Our correspondent Divya getting us further inputs here on this two films to face the chopping board. Yesterday, of course, we were discussing what was being seen as a comeback film of Raveena Tandon, which has been denied the certificate altogether, and the instructions coming in for this film Noor as well.
So, Sanskari CBFC is at it again. After doing Matra and more so, they have basically asked, the censor board has asked them to chop off the words like,
Yes, we're aware of those words, of course. We just made a mention of that, but yet again being seen as a sign of the CBFC in dictating terms on what words, what language can be used in a film. Our news editor Meghna Deka has been getting us further inputs here on this as well. Meghna, please go ahead.
It's quite interesting, Seher, to see the number of words and actions that CBFC has decided that it must get offended about. And one of the latest ones, that of sex toy. Now, these are audio cuts which have been recommended by the censor board. Now, remember, there has been a larger debate, of course. What exactly is the role of CBFC? Is it to sit and censor out clips, or is it to give certification? Of course, it was conceptualized that it ought to be giving only certification. But at the end of it, we've seen in several such instances, Seher, you've mentioned some of them yourself. Of course, is one of the most recent ones, and of course there are several other instances where they've even said that we're not going to give you a certification. So that's the big catch there. If all these film producers refuse to go ahead with the kind of cuts which have been recommended by the CBFC, there is a possibility that Pahlaj Nihalani and his men just may refuse to give certification completely. Now, many of the filmmakers have come out and said, if you find something which is objective, which could be objectionable, then at least you can perhaps give us an A certificate. You can decide on what kind of certification can be given. However, many times we've seen that this includes, even if you remember, say, the James Bond scene, they said kissing is un-Indian and hence it ought to be removed. This time around they said dalit is very sensitive, so their entire caste's word itself, dalit, is apparently very offensive and not to be used. And on top of that, sex toy, they say replace it with something else. And that is rather surprising, the kind of censorship that they've been showing, considering it is meant for certification in the first place.
That's right. Meghna, many would take offense to what the CBFC is trying to say here, indicate that the very use of the word dalit, which is indicative of a certain section or a certain caste, can be offensive to someone as well.
Well, yes, those are the kind of arguments that we expect to come out from the CBFC. However, then in that case, does that mean it sets a precedent that every possible reference to caste ought to be removed? Then the next logical step would be every reference to perhaps religion ought to be removed, and so on and so forth. So where is this going to end? And what about the creativity, the freedom for creativity, artistic liberty is something that all of them have been craving for. Of course, Amol Palekar too has asked for some kind of curbs on the censorship. We need to censor the censor. That has been one of the largest rows. So the big question is, to what extent can the censor board go when it says that this is sensitive or that's sensitive? If you feel something sensitive, then give a higher rating, give that A certification perhaps instead of a UA. Well, those kind of checks and balances are in place. So no one really is asking Seher to work outside the boundaries. But even within our own boundaries of the CBFC, there are certain checks and balances which could have been used instead. And many feel, especially the filmmakers, that hasn't happened.
That's true. Let's get in some voices. We're going to be getting in some voices from the film industry here on this as well. For the moment, we have Mr. Mayank Shekhar, film critic, with us over the phone line. Thanks for being with us, Mayank. Does this come in as yet another surprise, or fair to call it a surprise, or yet another shocking note? The film Noor, wherein which the makers of the film have been asked to cut out the word dalit, cut out the use of the word sex toy in the film.
Well, I mean, it stopped being surprising anymore, or shocking for that matter. In fact, it's not even funny. It used to be a joke, the kind of cuts that the censor board used to ask for and has been asking for over the past 2 years. But I think it just stopped being a joke. I mean, it's not even funny anymore. And I think at some point or the other, we need to actually look at the solution rather than keep bringing up the problem. The solution clearly lies in a committee that has been appointed by, by the government, headed by Shyam Benegal. There is a Supreme Court order yesterday for that committee to be report to be tabled. Okay. Now, if we're not going to look into that, then all we're going to get is with not kind of stories about this.
Right, Mayank, I'm afraid we'll have to reconnect with you on that in just a bit because of the bad audio line. But we essentially understand what you're trying to say here, of course, saying that this continues to be a cause of huge concern for the film industry because the censor board comes up with these demands of having certain cuts or in fact more recently has also decided to do away with even issuing the certificate and not allowing the release of a film. The case in point, of course, being for the film that which was in the news yesterday, believed to be Raveena Tandon's comeback film Matra, wherein which saying that it's an offensive it is a film which would offend sensibilities along several lines. So many cuts that could be asked for the movie, which is not possible, which is why they decided not to give it a certificate at all. And in the upcoming film of Sonakshi Sinha, Noor, the word dalit and sex toy has been asked for an audio cut. To not use these two words, to replace sex toy with adult site, and to not use the word dalit at all. Our correspondent for entertainment has been getting us further inputs here on this. Uday Pratap Singh with those details. Uday, in yet another film falling victim to this, is what many in the film industry would say.
Well, absolutely. And in fact, it's not the first time that Noor has faced censorship. Just a few days back, there was another shocker when the name of a popular journalist was muted out from the film. Noor is, of course, the story of Sonakshi Sinha, who plays the character of journalist, and she looks up to one particular famous woman journalist in India, and that woman's reference was used in the film, and her second name was actually leaked out, much to that journalist's, the surprise, and much to the movie maker's surprise as well. And now, of course, you have two more words, dalit and sex toy, which have been also muted from the film. So many would wonder as to what is the real rationality behind the censor's decision. There is no one particular scale that the censors seem to be following, and that's why, of course, many are saying that a strict guideline needs to be put in place that can be followed word for word in the future, that not only censors but certifies, and censors only in the case of very extreme, cases or scenes, because it's just happening again and again. It's no longer a joke. It's no longer something to be debated, and the filmmakers are saying that this is just curbing their freedom of expression again and again and again.
Absolutely. Uday Pratap Singh, many thanks for getting us those details there. It continues to be a concern.